In 2022, the FTC forced Epic Games to pay $520 million, including $245 million in refunds, after ruling that Fortnite tricked kids and their parents into unauthorized purchases. Epic had built an entire game economy around it. That fine wasn't about a bug or a glitch. It was about a business model. One built so a child could spend real money without ever fully understanding they were spending it. And Fortnite wasn't unique. It was just the one that got caught. Lock in. What follows is the story of how some of the biggest games on Earth build gambling mechanics into products marketed to children. Kids too young to walk into a casino, let alone understand odds, probability, or debt. We are going to trace that system back to its roots, from slot machine psychology to loot box drop rates, and show exactly how a 10-year-old ends up conditioned to chase a reward they don't even understand. Start with the fine itself, because a fine like this tells you exactly what investigators found. $245 million of it went straight back to families, refunds for purchases their kids made without permission, sometimes without even realizing they had spent real money at all. The other $275 million was colder. That part was not about refunds. It was a penalty for collecting personal data from children under 13 without asking a parent first. The FTC pointed to default privacy settings that pushed kids into voice and text chat with strangers, and one-click purchasing that made unauthorized spending easy to trigger and easy to miss, design choices investigators would later label dark patterns, interfaces built not to inform a user, but to quietly steer them toward the choice that benefits the company. For years, Fortnite had no purchase confirmation screen at all. A child could rack up hundreds of dollars in charges using the same button press they'd use to jump or duck. No warning, no second step, no moment where an adult had to say yes. The currency was built the same way. V-Bucks came in bundles that almost never matched what anything actually cost. So there was always a few dollars stranded, just enough to nudge you toward buying more. And when you spent that currency on a loot llama, you weren't buying an item. You were buying a chance at one, wrapped in the same flashing lights and reveal animation you'd find on a casino floor. Watch a kid open one of those crates, and you'll see the exact physiology casino designers spent decades chasing. The screen holds for a second. Music swells. A flash of light before the reveal. That pause isn't a loading delay. It's a deliberately engineered moment of anticipation, the same beat a slot machine reel holds before it stops. That comparison isn't a metaphor. It's the literal mechanism regulators would spend years unpacking, because by the time American regulators caught up, other countries had already called it what it was. In 2018, Belgium's Gaming Commission examined loot boxes across several major titles and reached a blunt conclusion: this is gambling. They banned the mechanic outright. The Netherlands went further, aiming directly at one of the most popular sports franchises on the planet. Their gambling authority ruled that FIFA Ultimate Team card packs, randomized packs of players, opened with real money, violated national gambling law. EA was forced to change how it disclosed pack odds to players across multiple European countries. Both rulings rested on the same legal logic. If you're paying real money for a randomized outcome, with a chance at something more valuable than what you paid for, that's not a cosmetic purchase. That's a wager. European regulators looked at the exact mechanic American parents were shrugging off as just a game feature and called it gambling. Regulators had a hunch. Researchers had the data. That same year, a researcher named David Zendel, working out of the University of York, found something no one could wave away. A strong statistical link between how much money teenagers spent on loot boxes and how likely they were to show signs of problem gambling. And in 2018, the World Health Organization added gaming disorder to its official list of diagnosable conditions. Not gambling disorder. A separate category, Created because gaming on its own had started producing the same compulsive patterns clinicians recognized from addiction. Two institutions, two countries, the same conclusion from two completely different directions. For a teenager, that's not an abstract statistic. That's a Saturday afternoon that turns into 6 hours. That's a birthday gift card gone in 20 minutes. That's the quiet shame of not understanding why you couldn't put the controller down. And that shame compounds quietly, because nobody around you is calling it gambling. Your parents think it's a video game. Your friends think it's normal. The only people using that word are researchers and regulators in another country. That's the part no one warns you about. I want to pause here, because this is the part that explains everything else. To understand why a loot box works the way it does, you have to go back decades before any of these games existed, to a psychologist named B.F. Skinner, and a wooden box with a lever in it. In the 1950s, Skinner ran experiments on what he called operant conditioning, how behavior changes based on reward. One finding mattered more than the rest. Animals given a reward every single time eventually lost interest. But animals given a reward randomly, unpredictably, kept pressing the lever over and over, long after they had stopped being hungry. Uncertainty, it turned out, was more compelling than certainty. Skinner called it a variable ratio schedule, reward on an unpredictable timer instead of a fixed one. It is one of the most powerful reinforcement patterns psychologists have ever documented, because the brain never fully learns to stop expecting that the next try might be the one that pays off. Decades later, a casino design researcher named Bill Friedman took that same principle and built it into Las Vegas. Friedman studied lighting, sound, and payout timing, and helped reshape casino floors around a single goal: keep people on the machine longer. Slot machines were engineered to produce frequent near misses, almost winning, again and again, which kept gamblers pulling the lever long after they had meant to stop. None of that actually required a casino floor to work. It just required a screen, a timer, and a reveal animation, which is exactly what a loot box is. That is the exact design principle sitting inside a loot box. Drop rates follow the same variable ratio reinforcement schedule casino engineers perfected. A rare item reveal triggers a dopamine response that looks almost identical, on a brain scan, to a slot machine win. And for most of the last decade, publishers didn't tell anyone what those odds even were. Loot box drop rates went undisclosed until regulators forced companies to publish them, starting around 2020, which means an entire generation of kids learned to gamble on machines whose odds nobody was allowed to see. Fortnite wasn't an outlier. It was one example of a business model running through the entire industry, including platforms built almost entirely around children. Roblox operates a marketplace of limited and mystery items that functions as a largely unregulated secondary economy. Robux, the platform's currency, is bought with real money and spent on randomized item drops with no guaranteed value. In 2021, Roblox went public at a valuation near $38 billion. Microtransactions weren't a side feature of that number. They were the engine underneath it. And unlike a casino, nobody has to drive there, dress up, or lie about their age at the door. It's already open, on a device already sitting in a child's hands. So what happens after the settlement, after the bans, after the research confirms what parents already suspected? Since 2022, multiple class action lawsuits have been filed against game publishers, alleging deliberate exploitation of underage players. Parents have described discovering thousands of dollars in unauthorized charges tied to a single child's account, charges that stacked up quietly, one tap at a time, while no one was watching the screen. In some of those cases, the charges only surfaced when a bank flagged unusual activity, which means the game itself never once paused to ask if a purchase looked right. In 2019, US senators introduced the Protecting Children from Abusive Games Act, aiming to ban loot boxes and pay-to-win mechanics in games marketed to kids. It hasn't ended the practice, but it's a sign of how seriously the pattern is finally being taken, and how far the industry still has to be pushed. Here's the part that's easy to lose underneath all the numbers. A slot machine requires you to be an adult to walk through the door. A loot box requires nothing, no ID, no age check that actually works, no moment where anyone has to admit what's happening. The mechanism is identical, the safeguards aren't. If you grew up playing these games yourself, some of this probably sounds familiar. The itch to open just one more pack, the small thrill, even when you told yourself it did not really matter. That feeling was not an accident. It was the product. What kids are learning, years before they are legally allowed anywhere near a casino, is not just how to spend money. It is what a reward is supposed to feel like. Unpredictable, chaste, never quite enough. And whether anyone building these systems intended it or not, that is the same lesson the casino floor was built to teach. Years from now, some of these kids will sit down at an actual slot machine for the first time in their lives. And some part of them will already know exactly how it is supposed to feel.